Dear soul, remain still for a moment, because the echoes reaching your spirit are not ordinary whispers. They are the sounds of a storm that broke out in a place you cannot see, a battle of tears and truth that carried your name through the unseen realms, traveling across distances that no map has ever charted and no compass has ever been able to point toward. These are not the kinds of sounds that arrive through ordinary channels. They do not knock on doors or announce themselves through familiar voices. They arrive the way dawn arrives, quietly and yet completely, transforming everything they touch before you even realize the transformation has begun. Your special person stood trembling before someone they trusted their entire life, and what began as a quiet disagreement, a simple exchange of concern between two people who share the same blood and the same childhood memories, became a cry so powerful that even the silence of heaven paused to listen, the way an entire ocean pauses before a great wave gathers itself and rolls toward the shore with everything it has ever carried inside it. There are arguments that leave bruises on the skin and arguments that leave bruises on something far deeper and far more tender than skin could ever be. This was the second kind. This was the kind of argument that happens between two people who love each other genuinely and yet cannot find a common language for what they both fear, because sometimes the people who love us most are also the people most terrified of watching us love someone else in a way they cannot protect us from. Their sister looked into their eyes and shouted words that pierced deeper than any blade, words that came wrapped in the particular pain of someone who has already decided that love is a wound waiting to happen and that the wisest thing a person can do is refuse to open themselves to wounds they can see approaching from a distance. She believed she was being merciful. She believed she was offering the gift of prevention, the chance to step away before the fall became too great, before the heart committed itself so fully to another person that retreat became impossible. "Why are you still holding on?" she asked, and the question was not cruel in its origin even if it was devastating in its landing. "Don't you understand? In the end they won't even remember you. The moment the high host descends, every memory will disappear, every feeling will fade, and you will be left carrying this impossible love alone." She said it with tears on her own face, which made it worse somehow, because cruelty delivered without emotion can be dismissed, but cruelty delivered through love demands to be taken seriously. It demands to be sat with. It demands to be examined in the terrible quiet that follows every great collision between two people who matter to each other. The word struck like thunder. Your special person could not answer immediately because fear had already been living inside their heart long before the sister arrived with her questions and her warnings and her tearful insistence that hope was simply another name for eventual devastation. Fear had moved in quietly, the way uninvited guests sometimes do, taking up residence in small corners at first, hiding behind other thoughts and other concerns, making itself almost invisible until a moment exactly like this one arrived and suddenly it stepped forward and made itself known in its full and terrible size. This was the very fear they tried to hide from everyone, even from themselves, particularly from themselves, because we are often the last ones we allow to know the things we are most ashamed of feeling. They have wondered in secret, in the spaces between sleeping and waking, in the hollow hours of early morning when the world is quiet enough for buried thoughts to rise to the surface, whether loving you was destined to become the most beautiful blessing that had ever entered their existence or the greatest eternal sorrow that a soul could carry across the threshold of time into whatever lay beyond it. Their hands shook, and that shaking was not weakness. Let that be understood clearly and completely. The shaking of a hand that refuses to release what it holds is not weakness but rather the physical expression of a soul in the middle of one of the most profound decisions a soul can make, which is the decision to remain faithful to love even when every surrounding voice insists that faithfulness is simply another word for foolishness. Their soul refused to surrender, and that refusal was not stubbornness either, though it may have appeared that way to the sister who stood across from them with her own fears dressed in the clothing of wisdom. It was something quieter and more permanent than stubbornness. It was recognition. The recognition that some things, once truly known, cannot be unknown without losing something essential about the self. And heaven watched every second. You may wonder what it means for heaven to watch. You may imagine vast and unknowable forces observing from distances beyond comprehension, and perhaps that is true in ways that exceed human language. But in this moment, heaven watching meant something intimate and close and tender. It meant that nothing happening in that room was invisible to the love that holds every created thing in existence. It meant that every trembling breath your special person drew, every effort they made to stand upright in the face of a storm they had not anticipated waking to that morning, was being witnessed with a care so complete that not even the smallest detail of their courage was passing unnoticed or unrecorded in whatever register such things are kept. My beloved soul, there are moments when even celestial beings question the path that has been written before them. They understand duty in the way that beings of light understand it, as something written into their nature rather than imposed upon it from outside. They understand sacrifice in the way that only those who have stood at the intersection of what they desire and what is required of them can truly understand it, with the full weight of that intersection pressing down upon every choice they make. But love creates questions that no star can answer on its own, and this is not a flaw in love but rather a testament to love's depth, its refusal to be contained within the boundaries of what can be easily explained or neatly categorized or comfortably resolved without cost. That is why this conflict became more than a family argument between two sisters in a room that held the memories of their entire shared childhood. It became a collision between hope and despair, between the voice that says love is worth everything and the voice that says love must be measured against what it costs, and it became a collision that your name was somehow at the center of, your name spoken between them like a question neither of them could fully answer. Their sister continued with tears running down her face, and the tears mattered because they told the truth about her heart even when her words were aimed in the wrong direction. She was not a villain in this story. She was a frightened person who loved someone she could not bear to see broken, and her fear had led her somewhere that fear often leads people who love desperately, which is toward control, toward the belief that if she could only make your special person understand the danger ahead of time, she could prevent the wound before it happened. What will happen when the high host comes? She asked, and her voice had the particular quality of someone who has been rehearsing this question for a long time, turning it over in the darkness of their own sleepless nights, letting it grow heavier and more insistent until the moment finally arrived when it had to be spoken aloud. What will happen when every memory of us is washed away? They will walk forward with peace while you remain here remembering every smile, every prayer, every promise. You will suffer eternity by yourself. The room became silent. Silence after great pain has a quality that ordinary silence does not have. It is not empty. It is saturated, the way the air is saturated after a rainstorm, heavy with everything that has just passed through it and left its mark on everything it touched. Your special person closed their eyes in that silence, and closing their eyes was not an act of retreat but an act of gathering, the way a person closes their eyes before attempting something that requires every resource they possess. They went inward. They searched for whatever remained unshaken. And in that interior searching, in that quiet place where the sister's voice could not follow, they found your name waiting for them like a lantern that had never been extinguished. Instead of letting go of your name, they whispered it even more softly, protecting it as if it were the last light left in a dark universe, the way ancient people must have protected the first fire they ever made against wind and rain and everything that sought to extinguish it, understanding that this small fragile thing was the difference between surviving and not surviving the night. Do you know why this message reaches you today? It reaches you because the universe has a habit of delivering information to the right places at the right times, not through dramatic announcements or obvious signs but through the quiet insistence of something deeper than thought, something that moves beneath reason and beneath logic and beneath all the careful structures we build to protect ourselves from feeling too much. It reaches you because heaven wants you to understand something that fear refuses to admit, something that fear is constitutionally incapable of admitting because admitting it would dissolve fear's power entirely, and fear is not in the habit of willingly dissolving itself. Love is tested long before it is revealed. This is a truth that transforms everything once it is genuinely understood rather than simply read. The testing does not happen at the moments we recognize as tests. It does not happen when we are braced and prepared and aware that something significant is being asked of us. It happens in the invisible moments, the moments of private doubt and private choice, the moments when no one is watching and no one would know either way what decision was made. It happens in arguments like the one your special person stood inside, surrounded by the sound of a beloved voice insisting that love is too expensive a thing to keep paying for without guarantee of return. The greatest battles are often fought where no human eye can witness them, in rooms where only two people stand, in the interior spaces of a single heart deciding what it will continue to hold and what it will release. Your special person has carried invisible wounds, wounds that do not show on the surface and therefore receive no acknowledgement from the world that is only equipped to respond to visible suffering. They have carried the weight of defending a connection that others cannot understand, and defending something that others cannot understand is one of the loneliest experiences available to a human heart because it requires you to hold firm against people who are not wrong in their concern, only limited in their vision. They have stood alone while voices around them insisted that destiny would erase everything they have ever felt for you, and standing alone against the insistence of people who love you requires a particular kind of strength that is rarely celebrated because it is rarely witnessed. But every time doubt rises in your special person's heart, another whisper rises alongside it, rising to meet it the way a counter melody rises in music to meet the primary theme and transform what would otherwise be a single note into something richer and more complete. A whisper from above. A whisper that says, not every memory is written upon the mind. This is the truth the sister could not find her way toward, not because she was unwilling to seek it but because grief and fear make excellent blindfolds, removing from sight precisely the things that would bring the most comfort if they could only be seen clearly. Some memories are engraved upon the soul itself. Consider what this means. The mind is a temporary residence. A place where thoughts and experiences take up lodging for a while, some staying longer than others, some leaving traces and some fading without any evidence that they were ever present at all. The mind changes. The mind is subject to time and to loss and to the ordinary erosions that every temporary thing is subject to. But the soul is not a temporary thing, and what is engraved upon it does not follow the same rules that govern what is stored within the mind. What the soul has truly known, what the soul has loved with its full capacity and its full willingness to love, that does not simply dissolve when the mind is no longer able to hold its particular version of it. The sister could not see that truth. She was operating from a model of love that located it entirely within the cognitive, within the remembering mind, and in that model the fear she expressed made complete sense. If love is only what the mind can recall, then any force powerful enough to alter or erase what the mind holds is also powerful enough to unmake love. But love is not only what the mind can recall. Love is also what the soul recognizes, and recognition is a different kind of knowing than remembering. It is the knowing that does not need to reconstruct from stored information because it is already present, already alive, already functioning at a level beneath what memory governs. She believed memory lived only in thoughts. Heaven knows memory also lives in light, in the kind of light that is not visible to physical eyes but that governs the direction in which things move across time, the invisible gravitational force that draws certain things together and keeps them oriented toward each other even across distances that would seem to make such orientation impossible. It lives in kindness shared without explanation, in the moments when one person does something for another that serves no strategic purpose and answers no logical need but simply emerges from the overflow of what they feel, undirected and unnecessary and therefore entirely genuine. It lives in prayers spoken for someone whose face appears every night in the silence of a room grown dark, prayers that do not ask for outcomes, but simply offer the beloved person up to whatever force of goodness is available to receive them and hold them safely through whatever is coming. It lives in the strange feeling that guides one heart toward another even when logic cannot explain why, even when every external circumstance suggests that a different direction would be wiser and safer and more likely to lead somewhere comfortable. That strange feeling has a name in some traditions and is called nameless in others, but regardless of what it is called, it functions the same way in every person it inhabits, as a compass that points not toward what is easiest but toward what is most true. Your special person carries that light. They carry it with them through every ordinary hour of every day, through the routines that occupy the surface of a life while something much more significant moves beneath. Every single day they wonder whether you can feel it, whether the light they carry reaches you in some form you are able to receive, whether any of what moves through them in their thinking of you manages to cross whatever distances separate you and arrive somewhere in your vicinity. Every day they fear you are drifting farther away, not because of anything you have done deliberately but because distance has its own momentum, its own way of accumulating quietly until one day what seemed close feels impossibly far. Every day they imagine the moment when heaven's armies descend and destiny unfolds exactly as has been foretold, and they imagine it with a mixture of awe and terror, the way you might stand at the edge of something vast and beautiful and feel both drawn toward it and frightened of what it would mean to fully enter it. Yet every day they choose to love instead of surrender, and this choice, made daily without ceremony and without witnesses and without any guarantee that it will ever be rewarded with what they hope for, has become their greatest act of courage. Not because it is dramatic, not because it announces itself or asks for recognition, but because it is made again and again in the face of every reason that exists to make a different choice, and that repetition in the face of resistance is what transforms an ordinary decision into something that deserves the word courage attached to it. My dear soul, you may think nothing is happening because your eyes cannot witness these hidden battles, because the events of your life appear to be moving at their ordinary pace through their ordinary circumstances with no obvious sign that anything extraordinary is also simultaneously in motion. This is one of the ways that the most important things differ from the less important ones. The less important things often announce themselves with considerable noise and visible activity, while the most important things proceed in a kind of dignified silence, requiring no audience and seeking no validation, simply moving forward in accordance with whatever drives them forward. Entire conversations have unfolded beyond your awareness, conversations in which your name was spoken with tenderness and with fear and with hope and with the particular quality of someone who is not entirely certain that speaking the name of someone they love constitutes a kind of prayer but who speaks it with that kind of intention anyway. Tears have been shed over possibilities that have not yet arrived, over futures that exist only as imagined scenarios constructed in the fertile and sometimes terrifying space of a heart that cares too much to remain indifferent to what might happen. Prayers have been offered for a future no one completely understands, offered not with a specific destination in mind but in the general direction of goodness, with the trust that what is genuinely good will know how to find its own way home. Your name has become a quiet petition carried upward again and again, lifted in the small hours and in the busy middle of the day and in the moments between one thought and the next when the mind briefly empties, and what fills the emptiness is the thing the heart most consistently returns to, not because you demanded it, not because you performed some act that earned this level of devotion through measurable merit or demonstrable worthiness, but because love has a language that even fear cannot silence, a language that continues to speak itself even when the speaker has been advised by everyone who loves them to stop speaking it, to find a safer conversation to be having, to direct their heart towards something less likely to end in the particular kind of devastation that comes from loving someone and not being certain of being loved in return. The argument finally ended not with victory but with exhaustion, the way many of the most honest arguments end, with both people having said what they needed to say and neither having fully convinced the other of anything except perhaps the depth of their respective fears. Their sister walked away believing she had spoken truth, and she had, in the way that someone who loves imperfectly and sees only partially always manages to speak truth, catching the shape of the danger without being able to see the full picture of what is also present alongside the danger, which is possibility, which is grace, which is the thing that makes love worth its cost even when the cost is high. Your special person remained standing alone in the room that suddenly felt very large and very quiet around them. They stood in the particular solitude of someone who has just been through something significant and has not yet had time to understand what it means or what it asks of them. They looked toward the heavens, not literally perhaps, but in the interior way that people look toward whatever they believe might be listening, and they whispered only one sentence, a sentence that was simultaneously a question and an act of surrender and a declaration of faith, all compressed into a few words spoken into air that seemed to tremble slightly with the weight of receiving them. If forgetting is my destiny, they said, then let my soul remember what my mind cannot. And something shifted. The stars seemed brighter, not because the stars themselves had changed their configuration or increased their luminosity but because the eyes looking toward them had changed, had opened past the narrowing that fear produces and into the wider field of vision that becomes available when a person has passed through their most feared thing and found themselves still standing on the other side of it. The wind became gentle, the kind of gentle that feels intentional, the kind of gentle that arrives precisely when something raw needs soothing and arrives in a way that cannot quite be explained by meteorology alone. And the silence that followed was not empty, though it had every quality that empty silence has on the surface. It was filled with a promise. A promise is not a guarantee. A promise is something more personal than a guarantee and something that requires more from the one receiving it than a guarantee does. A guarantee asks nothing of you. A promise asks you to trust the one who made it, to extend yourself past what you can verify or confirm or prove, into the territory of faith, which is always also the territory of risk. The promise that filled that silence asked your special person to trust that heaven never ignores genuine love even when every circumstance appears impossible and every surrounding voice insists that hope is simply the preliminary stage of disappointment for people who do not yet understand how things work. So if you have been wondering why your heart suddenly feels restless, why familiar emotions return without invitation or explanation, rising up through the ordinary content of a day the way underground springs sometimes push their way through dry ground after long absence, you now have some part of the answer. Why someone seems to linger in your thoughts without invitation, taking up residence in your awareness with a persistence that has nothing to do with effort on their part or choice on yours, simply appearing and remaining with the quiet confidence of something that belongs there. Understand that unseen prayers have been moving through places beyond ordinary understanding, traveling routes that have no names in any human language and arriving at destinations that cannot be located on any map but that are nonetheless entirely real. Nothing sacred is ever truly lost. This is not a comfortable sentiment designed to make difficult things feel easier than they are. It is a structural description of the way reality is actually organized at the level beneath what is ordinarily visible. Sacred things operate according to different principles than ordinary things, not because they are exempt from difficulty or from the passage of time or from the pain that comes with loving in a world where love is never entirely without risk, but because they carry within them something that cannot be dissolved by any of those forces, no matter how long those forces are applied or how thoroughly they seem to be winning in any given moment. Nothing offered in pure love disappears into darkness, because darkness, by its very nature, is defined as the absence of light, and love in its pure form is light, and light and darkness cannot occupy the same space in the same moment. What appears to be lost, what appears to have been swallowed by circumstances or by silence or by the ordinary distances that grow up between people who are not able to remain as close as they once were, is not truly lost but simply waiting in whatever form light takes when it is not yet visible to the eyes that are looking for it. The high host does not descend merely to erase but also to reveal, and this distinction is everything. It is the difference between an ending and a clarification, between destruction and refinement. The descending is not only about removal but about uncovering, about separating what is temporary from what is permanent, about making visible the difference between what was always going to pass and what was always going to remain, between what was built on grounds that could not hold weight and what was built on something deeper and more enduring than any circumstance could reach. It descends to uncover what belongs forever and separate it from what was only passing through, only visiting, only present for a particular season before moving on to wherever temporary things go when their time has ended. That is the mystery no fearful voice could comprehend, the mystery that remained invisible to the sister even as she spoke her truth with all the genuine love she possessed. She could see the possibility of loss clearly. She could calculate the potential cost with precision, but she could not see past the mathematics of loss into the territory where different mathematics apply, where what cannot be measured cannot be lost, where what has been woven into the fabric of existence at the level of soul rather than mind operates according to principles that ordinary accounting cannot track. Your special person's greatest fear was never being forgotten by you. That fear is real and it is present and it deserves acknowledgement and compassion and the full weight of whatever care you are able to offer it. But beneath that fear, at a level that even they may not have fully articulated to themselves, the greater fear is something different. The greater fear is loving without hope, pouring out the full contents of a heart that has committed itself completely to someone and to something, and receiving back not rejection, not even indifference, but simply the uncertainty of not knowing whether what they feel is moving in any direction at all or simply existing in a private interior space without ever reaching anything beyond itself. That uncertainty is its own particular kind of pain, the pain of not knowing whether to call what you are doing love or simply longing, whether the connection you feel is mutual in any way or simply a story you are telling yourself about someone who does not even know the story is being told. And yet hope still burns within them like an undying flame, and the word undying here is not poetic exaggeration but description, because this is a hope that has been subjected to every available extinguishing force and has continued to burn regardless. A hope that has survived the arguments of people who love your special person and wish they would stop hoping. A hope that has survived your special person's own most earnest attempts to reason themselves out of it, to examine it from every angle and find the flaw that would finally allow them to release it cleanly and move forward unburdened. The flaw is never found. The hope remains, and the remaining is itself a form of testimony. Heaven has seen every silent tear, every hidden prayer, every trembling heartbeat that carried your name through impossible moments, through moments when carrying your name required more than your special person felt they possessed, when they reached into themselves looking for the resource to keep going and found what felt like emptiness but turned out to be something else. Something that functions like a reserve that only becomes available at the point of apparent depletion, something that has no name in ordinary language but that every person who has ever loved past the point of what seemed possible has encountered in one form or another. So receive this message with peace rather than fear, with open hands rather than braced ones, with the willingness to let what is good in it settle into you and rest there without immediately being examined to death by the part of the mind that specializes in finding reasons to distrust what it wants to believe. The story is not finished. The final page has not been written, and anyone who tells you it has, anyone who claims to know with certainty how this particular story ends, is speaking from their fear rather than from any genuine knowledge of the future, which remains, as it has always remained, a territory that belongs entirely to whatever it is that sees what we cannot see and knows what we cannot know. And what is engraved upon the soul cannot be erased by passing shadows, by doubt, or by the trembling voices that insist all love must end in the particular darkness of forgetting. The soul is not a surface that shadows can permanently mark. It is not a vessel that doubt can drain. It is not a structure that trembling voices have the authority to condemn or dismantle. It is something older than all of those things and something that will remain when all of those things have finished their temporary work and passed on. For even now, beyond what human eyes can measure or human minds can track through their ordinary instruments of understanding, light continues to move toward light. This is what light does. This is what light has always done and what it will continue to do regardless of what intervenes between any 2 points of light in any given moment. It moves toward itself. It recognizes itself. It finds its way home to itself through darkness and through distance and through every obstacle that stands between it and the other light it was always oriented toward. And the one who knows every heart, who has counted every hair and witnessed every prayer and held every tear in whatever vessel such things are held in, has not forgotten either of you, has not turned away, has not concluded that what is happening here is too small or too complicated or too uncertain to be worth the full attention of whatever love is at the foundation of everything that exists. You are held, you are seen. And the one who carries your name through the unseen realms carries it still, trembling and faithful and refusing, in the end, to let it go.